Hello, good morning, and welcome back to our church history, in American church history, actually, and summer of 2021. This will be lesson number 9. So this is number 9, and we have just one more week to go after this one. And this, I believe, is where we left off last week. And as we go back a little bit, just for the review, there were several incidents in the colonial period, or colonial American church. And with the church itself, it doesn't stand alone by itself, as you know, and it's within the society, and it's within the culture, and it's within a nation called colonial America. So they did not have that name America, rather New England. They were known as New England. And in that New England, there are two things that, significant in understanding the latter period of this colonial America before they begin this Revolutionary War, and then or Civil War rather, Revolutionary War against England, and then making a nation, independent nation. First thing is the Picket War with the Native Americans. That's one thing. And then we looked at the Anne Hutchinson. While the Picket War is something that is rather political, the Anne Hutchinson is religious incident, where she tried to have a new separate own kind of religious group and the belief, which would be a little different from that of English. And the problem was that the Anglican Church or Church of England would not allow that to happen, or the Puritans even. So she was tried, and then she was detached from. The issue, what happened also is about the infant baptism as well. So that's going to be continuing to the next phase of the history, the church history. So this is like a doctrinal or theological controversy in the practicing of Christian faith. And that still happens. And the reason it happens is, even though we believe in the same Bible, the people may have, or actually they do, we do have a different interpretation. See, if there are like 10 Christians in just one place together, there's going to be 10 different opinions or interpretation of the Bible, even though they may share some of the interpretation, but there are still going to be some interpretation they may differ from one to another. And when that happens, there are two ways to settle down those issues. One, you kick them out and divide according to what you believe, and then make another group. Or you can just recognize his or her different interpretation and accept that it might be. But there's going to be certain line that you cannot you are not allowing someone to interpret differently. So that's where the problem is. And that had happened with the Hutchinson. But this Hutchinson case, as we look back, is merely it's a practice, and it's something that you may differ from one to another. Anyway, so for the many reasons, such as how to baptize and how to believe about the state and the church, these were the main issues that arise. And then as we looked, there is a congregationalist, and who has the final authority over a church or a local body of congregation? That's another issue that has continued. Still, we struggle with that. And so-called congregationalists, those are believing that the smallest congregation should and must have the authority over the body to determine what to believe and how to believe. So that's kind of issues that we had faced in American church when they were trying to be more of independent country. So the denominations, multiple denominations arise. Already in Europe, each nation had a different denomination because there was something called the state church. Like I told you, and in England there is Church of England, or later Anglicans. And there in German there are Lutheran Church, see, and so on. And in Switzerland they had their own churches. So each nation or country had their own denomination, meaning no one over them to exercise authority like Catholic Church is. A Catholic Church, the Vatican, which is in the city of Rome, is for today it's its own nation, even though it's a small area. It's a country and nation, and that Vatican or the Pope exercised the authority over many different churches in many different countries. So that's how still Catholic is. But in the nation of Germany, England, France, Switzerland, they were all separated from the Catholic Church. And this so-called Protestant church had several different denominations. Anglicanism, dominant England state religion. Okay, again, Lutherans is a German state religion, and Presbyterian is basically Calvinistic, Switzerland, and some French. They believed in Presbyterianism. The Presbyterianism is a kind of polity that would give authority to the delegates, called presbyter, which is usually the male elder of a church. So presbyters in a church would have the authority that's given by the congregation, and they would gather together, a handful of them, not that many, so they can discuss and make a decision. So they are the ones who gather together and talk about how the church should run, and they elect the pastors, and they elect the deacons. These things. So presbyter or the elders are the ones who has been given the authority to exercise and run the church again. So that's Presbyterianism. And still there's a Presbyterian church, still the same. Then Catholicism, we know what the Catholicism is, and they are the ones with the Pope, and then all the authorities are given to the top one person. And not only that, there were already denomination originated from the Europe, where they came from, to America, and now there's something called indigenous denominations. Indigenous meaning born out of this land, this soil. So, Baptist, this actually it came from the Europe, the Anabaptist, and then it becomes Baptist in this soil in America. It's rising. It's more. It's not totally purely indigenous, but many of new Baptist denominations arise in America, including Southern Baptist. There's Southern Baptist and some other Baptist, Conservative Baptist, and so on. But originally they were called together as Baptist because two reasons. One, they give a baptism to the infants, the adults. So, in addition to the infant baptism, which is normal to most of churches, including the new Protestant churches, they continue the practice of infant baptism that were normal in Catholic tradition. They brought it, but some of the Protestants, they thought, how can a baby would know, acknowledge it, and able to make that decision to himself or herself? And then that they thought it's not valid, biblically speaking, not culturally speaking. So they were against the idea of infant baptism. So in addition to that baptism, they tried to give, and they actually did give, adult baptism. So that the Anabaptism, meaning once again or again baptism, Baptist, that happened. And then another thing is a mode of baptism. Most churches, just like Catholic does, were giving the just a little bit of water to forehead or head or somewhere in your body. So you're not immersed or went into the water, just like it is recorded in the Bible when Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. The Bible clearly says Jesus was immersed under the water and came out of it. So Baptists believe you should be baptized in the same manner as Jesus did, because we are Christians. If you're a Christian, while the as long as the condition allows. One of the reasons the sprinkling baptism or just dropping of a few waters on forehead and so on, the reason that kind of baptism has developed is because there are some land and countries where the water is scarce. You cannot find a pond, lake, or river to immerse someone. And then if you're in a desert, all sand, where are you going to find the water to emerge? So those are some of the examples where the sprinkling or just dropping of, dropping of water has been, it's a necessity. I mean, it's a limitation they had. And also in the cold countries, in the winter time, you're not going to be able to find the water to dip in. It's going to be all frozen. The lake, river, whatever, big body of water is going to be frozen. And even if it's not frozen, you cannot dip someone in that cold water, freezing water. So when that is the case, I mean, you sprinkled and said you're baptized. So I mean, it's again issue of it will be good when you can sustain both form and meaning. Like, I mean, you can dip someone into the water, and then the meaning of going down and then being born again. See, that's what the baptism actually means. And but when there's a limitation, hindrance to sustaining the form, then least you have to keep the meaning. So meaning is more important than the form. So we learned the lesson from those Baptists. And there were like Quakers, and then Moravians, and Mennonites, and Dunkers, to name just few of them. These are the main denomination that has arisen from this Baptist or congregational movement or separatist. So we looked at the separatist, congregationalist, Baptist, and so on. And the major issue is, again, so these are some of the issues that made the birth of different denominations. First, state versus church. This issue is still going on. Then autonomy of a local congregation. You gather as a church in a building, and that you worship together every Sunday. That's called a congregation. So who's going to have the authority over this congregation? Is it going to be your pastor, or is it going to be the bishop, or is it going to be pope? So that's going to be the level of the authority, and then also with that, There is something called the church polity. Polity means it's not policy or politic, but polity means how you organize and run a church, a local church. So how are you going to run a local congregation? Then also the mode of rituals and practice, how to worship. So are you going to say that Apostles' Creed in the worship? Or are you going to do the praise? Or are you going to do the singing with piano or without piano? Or with the instrument or without instruments? These are the things that begin to divide the church. The positive aspect of having many denominations is being able to take diversity or another big word in understanding American church, not only American church, but America itself, the nation of United States of America. When we try to understand this country and the culture and the people as a foreigners, as immigrants, this would be the key words. And especially when you're trying to understand the church, the American church, you need to focus that as a keyword. Diversity, tolerance. How much can you tolerate or accept or acknowledge the difference and say, oh, okay, we can tolerate and you're still with us? Or you say, no, we cannot tolerate that and you will be separate from us. But we are going to have full respect for your decision to separate. Another word, the unity. I believe this unity, any culture has a unity. And see, as I experience both Korean culture and being born in Korea, South Korea, and being raised there, being educated up to early high school years. Then I moved to Africa, another country, but did not attend the African school, but attended American school, the missionary school, and then finished the high school there. So good 4 years of education in American system. See, as I experienced both cultures, and then later that I come to America, I lived about almost 30 years here, and what I find as a bicultural, that the unity in the Asian culture, or rather say, not all the Asian cultures are the same, but generally speaking, most Asian cultures, especially those countries who has been influenced by Confucius idea or ideology, they they have one thing in common. The unity comes from usually the unity comes as with the structure and system, rather, or more of that. While the European countries, especially this country called America, your unity is spirit. I don't know if this is the case still, but there is something called Americanism. The ideal that was embedded in the Constitution of America when they were designed, that Thomas Jefferson and a few other people got together to, write a Constitution of America. They had something called American spirit. And the large part of that American spirit, so-called Americanism, is based on the Christian belief, especially the Protestant religious and when we go back to its biblical ideal. Biblical ideal or biblical ethos, in another way. So the unity in America is created by something that is the spirit that is based on the Christian faith or biblical belief. And it still is. But today, 21st century America is facing a great challenge against this unity. And as we see, there's a clear division among the American people, the population. Generally, it's represented in the form of political party, Democratic and Republican. But the irony is, both Democratic and Republican, most of the leaders, except the Kennedy in the past, they were all Christians. Now we have a new Catholic president, right? But whether you're Catholic or Protestant doesn't matter. They are they are still Christians. So the Christian spirit and faith, the foundation is still running, but there's a strong secular challenge that is going against the biblical ideal. For example, the right to choose, or right to choose to abort, so-called abort your baby. So that's considered woman's right in America. Not in America, but some people believe in that. And there are those who believe in so-called gay rights. Yeah, I support gay rights, but the being a gay itself, biblically, it's not biblical ideal. So there's some fine line that you need to discuss, but I'm not going to go further into that issue because that's not the issue that we are trying to discuss here. The issue is the unity is no longer so unity. There are two different spirits in America as we see today. But in the old days, in colonial America, there's one spirit, and the unity is created and sustained, maintained, and transferred by the Spirit. That's Western, and especially America. The Spirit is that's where the unity is. So the church said, as long as we abide in the same Spirit, we are the Christians, and we'll accept you as fellow believers, even though we may differ in these ideas about state and church, autonomy of a local church, and there are some doctrinal or theological differences, including the baptism, and then how to do the perform the baptism, and how to worship, and the order of worship, and who's going to be participate in the worship, and who's able to pray and who's not, and can we ordain a woman or not, and these things. These are the things that divided church into denominations. But still, there's one thing they believe together. The one good example for the common denomination. See, this is a denomination, but there's something called common denomination, that even though they are different in other areas, there is something that they would share, and we call that an absolute truth. And then one example is Westminster Confession. And then there are some other confessions that, creed. Creed means the statement of belief. It just writes out what we believe. So this kind of confession and creed says, this is what we believe. For example, the salvation through Jesus Christ. And only through Jesus Christ. Nothing else. So that's key element for Christian. And Trinity, true in God. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. They are the same person, and they're all with the same rank. That's Trinity, or true in God. And the virgin birth of Mary, the Messiah Jesus. See, these are some of the core, so-called core belief, the creed that we share. And if that is different, we call it heresy or cult. So that's kind of idea that we need to be aware of as you look into these denominations. So these later, that did not happen until later, but as they have these different denominations, they needed some idea or the guideline to determine who's heretic and who's not, who's abiding by the biblical truth and who is not. So they need to draw a line. And we, even though we may differ on these things, we say this is what we agree upon. This is how we define ourselves as Christians. And today, most of us who agree on the biblical faith is called evangelicals. Okay, so evangelicals are those who believe in basically Westminster plus some other creed. That's pretty much same as Westminster. Okay, let's take a short break and I'm gonna come back. Thank you. Okay, we are back, and yeah, we looked at the development of new denominations in the colonial American church. This Puritan narrative is one good example in understanding how this, development of the churches and so on happened. And first, it's a separation. They were separated from the Anglican Church, and they had this ideal, the theology of city on a hill. Another name for a city on a hill in Bible is Zion, and so they were called Zionists. But today, Zionist would be a different meaning than colonial America. But at the time, the Zionist means, looking toward that land, new land, called Zion. And they are like a revision of charter. Charter is another form of the creed, or confession. So confession, charter, or the creed is the statement of faith. So they went through some, change within the Puritans. Because when you begin something, there are not that many people, and whoever is leading the group, he or she or the leaders, the group leaders, they are able to maintain or manage the group within the one same belief and spirit. But any group that begins to grow in size and numbers of people, it has to, it's mandatory. It's inevitable to include all sorts of people, all the age, all the genders, and all different backgrounds. So you have no way to control unless you have a very solid and strong and strict membership policy. But the problem with the church is that you cannot, make an examination or audition or test or interview to exclude someone who is coming to your church. So the church is like an open door. You don't have any walls. Anyone can come into the church, right? But there is some system of membership, but that membership is not so strict. And many different people with the different ideas and belief comes into the church. So as the membership grows, that you have to face this again issue of diversity. And the same thing happened with the Puritans. The number of Puritans begin to increase. It becomes a big kind of group or denomination, and then they would have all different ideas that are rising within the Puritan church itself. It's not the issue just for the Puritans. It does happen with other kind of sort of groups or denominations. So to prevent that from happen, they try to create a community, actual community living together. Not only the geographical sharing of the places, but they share the economy, political, and the cultural. Separation from the general public. For example, the Quakers are one good example, and Amish people, the well-known school shooting happened to this Amish people a few years ago. They still live. Many of them live even without electricity, but most of them adopted electricity, but they still wear the very old like a 18th 17th century style dress and so on. See, that's from the intention to keep their community with the purity. So that's how they reacted. And there's a famous solemn witch trial that happened within the Puritans. So Puritans, they would have their own share of struggles. See, here's an irony. They came to America to avoid the persecution from the church they were belonged to. They wanted to separate themselves because the church, Anglican Church, would not allow them to worship the way they worship and to believe in the way they want to believe. And when the same thing happened within their church, the Puritan church itself, they are the ones who begin to persecute their own people again, because they were not allowing the different belief and different sort of worship within their own congregation or own denomination. So the history kind of repeats itself. Whether you think it's sad or it's irony, but that's the irony of history. And that not only happened only to the Puritans, it happens within your church as well, right? As long as they believe in the same confession and the basic core absolute faith that we need to share, we need to respect their right and freedom to worship the way they want to worship and believe in the way they want to believe. This goes to the different religion as well. As a Christian, you have to respect the freedom and right for other different religion, the right to believe in Buddhism or Islamic faith or whatever they believe in. Our duty is to, persuade them in very personal way, not impersonal or authoritarian or manipulative. These are not the ways. Very personal ways, so they can make their free own personal decision to come to believe in Christian faith. Unless that happens, you cannot force them to believe in something that because they believe it, for the fear of life. That's not how we convert someone. So, but that, as I say it, in the history, it did happen. the crusade against Muslims, the Turkey and then other Islamic nations in the history of church. That had happened. And so-called conquistadors, the Spanish, the military power who coming into America, especially Central and South America, they did force them to believe. Same thing happened with the North American Indians, so-called the indigenous Americans in North America. I mean, that had happened. So you're not supposed to do that. That's not Christian. That's not what the Bible teaches you. So those in other religion, for many reasons, they came to believe what they believe, and you should respect their faith. And see, sadly, that only happened to some other religion that's different from Christianity. It happens within the church, and it's not something that of history, but that happens even today. So that's the lesson from history, right? Okay, let's have some snapshots on this special period in American history, the colonial America. So colonial America took root in Virginia in 1607 and gained momentum when the Pilgrims or the Puritans arrived in Massachusetts, the Plymouth, in 1760. In 1607. By 1760, there were 2 million settlers. Virginia became the first British colony in 1607, when 100 members of Virginia Company founded the first permanent English settlement along the James River. So the Pilgrims came first, and then some other people followed in the same year. And so that's how it began, the colonial America. So England officially began to colonize the North America. Plymouth Plantation. Plymouth Plantation was a North American colony settled in 1620 by English separatists, later known as Pilgrims, who desired to practice their own religion freely. The Pilgrims, a group of English religious separatists who preceded the Puritans in Massachusetts by a decade. So they came about 10 years earlier than the others. Landed on a ship named the Mayflower in 1620, and the expansion of colonial America began in earnest. So that's how the history is begun. So there's a little dispute on the how it began, but here you gotta remember the date, 1607 and then 1620. So this is an example of Plymouth plantation in the later 17th century. So that's how it's not a photo picture, but it's what it is. And then we have Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630. This will be like 10 years later than the plantation. A group of Puritans led by John Winthrop established the Massachusetts Bay Colony after fleeing religious persecution in England. So this is how all it developed. And again, the main thing with this snapshot is the beginning of this America, the land of freedom, so we call. It had begun with this history of Christians. So that's very significant for the America. No nation in global history so far has started from the refugee or religious refugee. So this is first time ever, and that has very significant meaning to us all Christians. See, as you see the map, this is a Massachusetts Bay Colony at the time. And there's a Plymouth plantation and so on. So that's where the Massachusetts is today, right? And Bay Colony would look like this. So, very, again, ironic thing is, even though the State First Church is kind of, they are conflicting many times, going against one another. The thing is, this military force, the militant, and the church or the religion goes hand in hand. That happened. I mean, it happened in Catholic Church, and then as the Spanish and Portuguese go invade South America, the church and the military, the state and church went hand in hand together to colonize. So this is very ironic. And that this is where us Christians need to think twice and need to be very critical. When the state power and the religious power goes hand in hand, and in history and even today, that leads to corruption of religion, corruption of leadership. So today we need to be able to see if the state and church powers are joining their hands in front or behind. And we need to have that watchful eyes on them, the church leaders and the state leaders, or the military power and the religious power. So as we look at this picture of Bay Colony, the colonization or making of a colony would not be able to happen without the religious group, or the religious group without military. As this religious group tried to begin their settlement, expand their territory, and start build up the community of faith, there were the forces. I mean, who lived in that land? the owner, the Native Americans, they were kicked out. They said they bought it from the Indians, made a deal, okay. But many did, and many Native Americans did so because there were no other ways to fight against this military power that protects and that comes with that, religious group. So that was kind of, the narrative that happened over and over again in the land of America as the Europeans pour out and coming in like 2 millions by the beginning of 18th century, right? So, okay, John Winthrop. We just read that he established this Massachusetts community. So John Winthrop was the first governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He was famous for describing the colony as a city on a hill. So again, the issue would be the separation of state and church, the politic and religion. So, when a religious leader, John Winthrop, becomes a civil and political leader as well, just like this Bay Colony. See, that's an issue. As, for example, Calvin also became the mayor of the city of Zurich. See, the religious leader becomes a political leader or community leader as well. There's always good and bad. Okay, good is good, but what problem is the bad side of it? And so-called the city on a hill, that's heaven on earth, another word. So the Puritans or the Pilgrims, they wanted to establish a paradise or the heaven on earth. Not only they are looking toward the heaven, toward the beyond this life, but they say we can create a heaven, the heavenly city, the Zion, the city on a hill, on right here. And this idea of city on a hill, you find the very good houses, those expensive houses in America on a hill. For example, Beverly Hills is on the hillside, on the top of the hill. So I think it has to do with some idea here, city on a hill. They took the biblical idea literally and tried to have a house on a hill. Okay, this is how John Winthrop would have looked like. This is the actual picture. How do I say? That were painted by an artist. So this ought to be how he looked like. Not the exact, but most likely. Rhode Island. In 1636, Roger Williams founded Rhode Island, which became known for its religious tolerance and the regulation of religious behavior. This is a good example where the church and state separation worked. So even though Roger Williams becomes the leader of the community, of so-called Rhode Island, he offered religious tolerance. So that means state is not going to be involved in the matter of church or church matters or religious matters. And there is no like a regulation with the religious standard. On the contrary, the Massachusetts community, the church rule, the religious regulation and political or the law, civil law was almost the same. So the religious regulation becomes a civil regulation, and civil regulation is the same as church regulation. So there is no difference between the church and the state. Church is a state and state a church. So that's where there was. But the Rhode Island, that became a different story. So as we look at this history, so people have different ideas. Some believe the community should run by the religious standard, Christian standard. And some believe there's a difference, a clear difference between general civil behavior and the religious behavior. And it's still going on in America. Roger Williams, he's a guy, same Christian. He's a theologian, advocate for the separation of civil and church authority and founder of Rhode Island. So again, the clearly states that Roger Williams is a kind of person, a believer, a Christian, who believed in the separation of civil and church authority. This is how he would have looked like, Roger Williams. Now, Rhode Island Royal Charter. Okay, so 1663, Rhode Island Charter, Royal Charter made a unified government in the colony possible, acknowledged American Indian land right, and declared religious toleration. So the key for us who are studying American church history is religious tolerance. So the charter means it made it as a law. It's written, not just the idea. It is written, and it became a law and says we'll pursue religious tolerance. It means what it means. You can believe whatever you want to believe, and we are not going to make a punishment or make an imprisonment or even sentence death like a witch trial. We are not going to do that. You're going to believe whatever you want to believe, and you are free to believe, and church, the state has nothing to do with your religion. So that's how the state and church, or the religion and the politic has been separated. But not all the communities in the New England did the same. See, at the beginning, they had all different ideas, depending on where they came from and where they lived. King Philip's War. This is a very political incident. It seems like it has nothing to do with the church. For 14 months, Indians raided settlements and colonialists launched counterattacks. So as the Native Americans, they begin to attack this colonial community, the white people, the European people, because they were invading their land and they're threatening their existence. So, I mean, it's natural for them to counterattack. When you're being pushed out of your land, and then you have every right to fight against. It ended after King Philip, the chief of Wampanoag Indian. Wampanoag is difficult to pronounce. Wampanoag Indian tribe, the chief has been assassinated. It doesn't say who assassinated him, but it's most likely the white people, the Europeans, etc. So, my guess is the one who either directly assassinated or the ordered or paid for assassination has to be a Puritan, Pilgrim, or at least Christian of some sort. So in large picture, a church had committed this killing, and that killing is for the greed, and the killing is for the invasion. Killing is for the killing of, killing is killing of other ethnic group, the race. Unless these people believed these Indians are like at the rank of animals, just like a dog or a cow or pig, or if they did not think them as at that level, the killing would not be justified. But later on in history, the church does justify what had happened in the history, and they try to cover up and beautify even this history. So we need to look at these incidents from a different perspective. I told you about the historical perspective. That's why it is important to have good, proper, balanced historical perspective. We are not trying to side with either this Native American nor the colonialist or the European that came into America. But we're trying to stay in the middle and see the issues and who's at the fault and who's done more wrong and so on. But doing so, my perspective says, these are invaders, the white people. They did not have permission or agreement from these Indians to take land as they did. So the picture of King Philip, a very charismatic person, as you see in this picture. And this would be the picture of King Philip's War. And this European with the guns, the muzzle guns, and then there's native Indians. They are fighting with bow and arrow, right? So who's going to win? This bow and arrow is a no match for the guns, right? And now another character is William Penn, and he's a Quaker and activist, a religious tolerance advocate and founder of the Pennsylvanian colony. So following the Rhode Island, now the Pennsylvania is a little south, and this person, William Penn, is another person who offered and who acknowledged and who pushed this religious tolerance, the freedom to worship, or right to worship. So he was advocate. Advocate means someone who is pushing for it. Yes, saying yes for it. So this William Penn is another person who has been on the side of the church, separation of church and the state. See, this is how he would have looked like. Yeah, nice guy. Salem witch trials is another sad page of American church history. Citizens accused one another of witchcraft, leading to mass hysteria and the imprisonment plus death of approximately 170 community members. So this is crazy. I mean, you think, how can it happen? But when you become fanatics, religious fanatics, that this is possible. This is possible. So, religion, Christian killing another Christian. See, that is sad. It's something that should not happen, and that had happened. Okay, thank you, and I think the time's up for this week, and we'll continue. We have just one more week left, and I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for coming and listening and being a good student. See you next week. Bye-bye.